This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha. If you're like me, you've noticed mail delivery isn't quite what it used to be. For many people, it's an annoyance. And yes, a problem when we can't send or receive the mail we need. But delays with the U.S. Postal Service are also a matter of life and death. Joining us now to talk about his latest story is Kavahn Mansouri, an investigative reporter with the Midwest Newsroom. Kavahn, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So your story is about baby birds, primarily chickens and turkeys, dying during transit with the U.S. Postal Service. In a broad stroke, Kavahn, what is it that you found?
Yeah, basically I found that a lot of the changes that are happening at the United States Postal Service are leading to delays, some of them intentional. And through that, this longstanding tradition of sending baby birds through the mail has led to a lot of them dying in transit, showing up on customers' doorsteps dead, basically because delays or sometimes just kind of mishaps that happen during shipment.
Mm-hmm. Now, it came as a surprise to me that you could even ship live baby birds, but I understand this has been happening for years. So what is the history behind this practice?
Yeah, it was surprising to me too. Basically, it's a 100-year tradition of the United States Postal Service. They've been doing it for a long time. And basically, it is a way for freshly birthed, live birds to be shipped sometimes long, sometimes short distances across the country for a pretty reasonable fee. And it's been going on for a long time, and it's a way for hatchers to make money. It's a way for backyard farmers to get certain types of birds they might want for their farm.
Mm-hmm.
4-H kids, as you can hear in the story, who want to show a particular bird can get it that, it might not be raised locally. They can get it shipped to them.
Mm-hmm. And are there special regulations then when it comes to shipping live birds, Kavahn?
Yeah, as the rules of the United States Postal Service put out is they have to be put in express. It has to be a 2-day shipment. The boxes need to be marked, live birds. And some breeders that I've talked to, they'll put food in there, so the animals are, and it could be insulated in some cases. There's varying levels of what people will do, but at the very minimum, it has to be express, special shipment to make sure that it arrives on time. But the problem is that a lot of breeders that I talk to, especially smaller breeders, say they may get 2-day shipping, but then it doesn't end up being 2-day shipping. It ends up being 3 or 4-day shipping, and just that extra day can be fatal for these birds.
And then you'd mentioned that there's some intentional delays going on. So that's not supposed to be happening with this live mail, right?
Yeah, as far as I understand, these are supposed to be delivered in 2 days, but these intentional delays of the new Postal Service plan that is being put into effect basically has been slowing things down. And some recent news that came out is that Postmaster DeJoy has a plan that will actually slow down those deliveries even more, and it could be 12 to 24 hours in some rural areas where a lot of these shipments are headed.
Mm-hmm. Now, someone that is featured in your reporting is a woman named Amy Golson who lives near St. Charles. Tell us about her and her story. Yeah,
so I came across Amy Golson in all places on the St. Louis subreddit one night while I was browsing, and I just saw this sort of post that said USPS delays are getting worse, and way down in the comments, she had said, "I received this shipment of dead turkeys," and I was like, "What?" First of all, turkeys are being shipped through the mail. Mm-hmm. They're arriving dead. So I, through a very convoluted process, reached out to her, and she shared her story that basically, she had ordered, it wasn't the first time either, she had ordered a package of 10 turkeys, and she had watched them. They were being shipped from Ohio, and basically they got to one of the distribution centers and just stayed there for, I think, 3 days.
Oh, wow.
And by the time it arrived on her front porch, she described as their beloved postal worker who, at no fault of her own, delivered this, while she wasn't home, delivered this package of dead turkeys, dead baby poults. That by the time she got home, she knew what to expect. The box was quiet. And a quiet box is a dead box, as she does say in the story. So,
and that's not a good experience for either the recipient or for the person who has to make that delivery.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I understand that this is not the first time that the Golson family has had an issue what other issues did they have in the past?
Yeah, so there was a shipment, I believe, a few months prior to that was lots of baby chicks. It wasn't a huge shipment either. And just to give you some context, sometimes these shipments are huge. I talked to one breeder who received a package of 200 where there was only like a handful that survived. Maybe a little bit more than that, but either way. But in earlier experience, they had received an order of chicks that was left out in the freezing cold. It had been delayed, but they sort of like went into action. The Golsons kind of like they microwaved some towels. They got some warm little baths going, in bowls, and they tried to resuscitate a few. And a few of those chickens survived, and I believe they now roam the Golsons' backyard farm outside of St. Charles.
So Amy Golson's child, Evie Golson, is 18, and she was going to be showing turkeys as part of a 4-H competition, that the most recent sort of batch of did not arrive on time or alive poults. So what is it that happened there?
Yeah, that's right. So those turkeys that arrived deceased, such a morbid story. I apologize.
Right.
But they arrived dead. The hatchery sent a replacement batch, and Evie was able to raise the best of the litter, as they say, and ended up getting a blue ribbon at the St. Charles County Fair. So there, it was. For a while we were following the story, I was sort of under the impression that maybe it was one of the ones from the original batch, but they were all replacements, and one of them got a blue ribbon. But it was basically, it put them back a little ways, but for the most part, they got their replacement. And that's the story. A lot of these breeders end up having to send new out-of-pocket. They lose money on those shipments.
And on that side of things, the hatcheries are doing the mailing of the birds. How is it that they have handled these delays in shipping?
A lot of the smaller breeders I spoke with basically said they, for a time, some have started up, saying that things have gotten a little bit better. Basically said they stopped shipping. Some just because it was sort of a mixture of things. Sometimes it's a money thing. Sometimes it's an ethical thing. Sometimes it's a problem of like they don't want to see these babies they care about dying in the mail. These small chicks or baby birds.
And apparently there was an incident in 2020 wherein more than 4,800 chicks died in a single Postal Service shipment to a customer in Maine.
Yeah.
This was like 4 years ago during the pandemic, ostensibly. So, what has been the effect on the hatcheries and on the businesses? Is there something apart from scaling back on making long-distance shipments that they've gone to?
Not that I can tell at the big scale. I talked to a hatchery out of Lebanon, Cackle Hatchery, and they have these big shipments that kind of go. They're like are flown across the country sometimes. They, from what I can tell, haven't scaled back. But on the smaller side, these smaller companies, when they lose this stuff, it's not only like a money loss; it's also sort of a personal loss for them because they're hatching these babies. So, that I think it's hard to say. A lot of this is like hard to track because the United States Postal Service doesn't actually even track or know how many of these animals are dying in transit. They don't keep any record of that.
Are there any shipping alternatives that hatcheries could use?
Not really anyone as prominent as the United States Postal Service and anything that is as low cost. A lot of the hatchers I talked to, a lot of people who have stopped basically said, well, the only alternative is find a local source and go there. But that can be, as Amy Golson said, she prefers to do that. But it's also a day trip. She has to drive all day, back and forth to get that. And that's hard when you work a full-time job or have kids or anything.
Right. Now, you mentioned earlier that Postmaster General DeJoy's plans include slower delivery in rural areas. What are Missouri congresspeople doing about that?
Yeah, so first and foremost, actually just today, Representative Emanuel Cleaver came out and said that he is against any further delays, especially for rural areas. That is a new part of to save even more money, because this is all based on saving money from the post office. They are wanting to save millions and millions of dollars a year by cutting back on some of their services. So he's pushed back on that and said no more, because the delays, again, will be 12 to 24 hours more on top of what's already going on. Mm-hmm. And then Rep. Cleaver and Sam Graves, who represents the 6th District, the northern part of the state, they also have introduced legislation called the Pony Up Act, which is a little different from what we're talking about here. But they basically would if that were passed, and it hasn't made a whole lot of progress, but if it were passed, it basically the USPS would have to pay for any late fees that customers incurred on bills that like arrived late to them, or when they ship it back to say you and I are sent a bill to Ameren and it took too long and we got a late fee. Well, if that bill were to pass, USPS would have to cover that. So that's the Pony Up Act.
Yeah. And final question here, is there anything that you will be following with this particular story, or maybe people that you interviewed who are particularly interested in keeping tabs on what happens with this?
Yeah, I'm really interested in to see if this is a form of shipping that continues. There's certainly ebb and flows. Some of the small breeders we talked to say things have gotten a little bit better. But at the same time, a lot of the people I talked to, a lot of my friends and family I told about this story, they would say, they ship birds, like live birds, to the mail, and I think people were surprised by that. And I remember reading a story that was done about this during the pandemic that Harvest, one of our partners, did, and there was a question of, should this be done? And the answer was, well, there's not many alternatives. So there is an ethical question, and I'm interested in what the level of that is, because it seems like a lot of people are sad that these chicks and poults and what have you are showing up dead, but there's still the question of should this be happening? And that's something we didn't get to in the story. We couldn't quite find an answer to that. So.
Well, if anybody out there is listening and has some insights, your inbox is open.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Kavahn Mansouri is an investigative reporter with the Midwest Newsroom, which is a partnership between NPR and member stations in Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, and Nebraska. Kavahn, thanks again for talking with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Today's episode was produced by our executive producer, Alex Hoyer.
Audio engineering and podcast design by Aaron Dorr.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations. And leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thanks.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
The Gateway brings you the day's news each weekday from around the St. Louis region and the state capitals in Jefferson City.
Our schools are accredited. We don't need this bill.
And Springfield.
How many more years must pass before lawmakers see time is of the essence?
I'm Abby Larico. Join me each weekday for The Gateway on the STLPR app or wherever you get podcasts.